Hello everyone. This lesson will be super helpful for those of you that are short and need to hem jeans. Before I learned this technique, I tried to hem a couple jeans before, and it was really difficult because at the seams it's super thick. And so I learned this, and then when I worked at Buckle and was hemming jeans there, I had to do it a lot. So if you notice, most jeans have this special kind of thread on it. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's orange, sometimes it's white or silver, and they're all different. And this is actually called jeans thread, I believe, but it's super thick. It's fuzzy because I believe it's cotton. They have it in blue also. These are really hard on your machine. They're super thick and they can't go through it, so a lot of places would suggest putting this in the bobbin instead of the needle. But with this technique that I'm going to show you, you actually don't even need that kind of thread. You can just use regular thread because what we're going to do instead of basically folding up the bottom twice, which is what you would normally do, we're basically going to sew like this. And so when they're done, the hem will fold down and it'll look like the original hem. So if you look super close, you'll be able to see the stitches, but for the most part, it'll look invisible from far away. So this is just a pair of jeans that I'm going to donate. I don't have any that actually need hemmed. I have an opposite problem, and mine usually aren't long enough. So I'm just going to make it simple and say, okay, I need 1 inch off of the hem. What I would suggest doing is trying on your jeans with the shoes that you would normally wear them on, or wear them with. If you are wearing them with boots sometimes and other shoes other times, do it when you're wearing the highest heel. That way they won't be too short in the end. The other thing is this works best with straight leg pants, but I have done it with ones that flare out a little bit. You just have to stretch it when you're doing it. So let's say I needed 1 inch. So you put these on, someone pins it. So I usually just pin when I'm fitting people, and you have to have someone else do this. Just put a pin in the back, just so you know how much you need it. The other thing is too, sometimes people have one leg that's longer than the other. So it's more important that they are sitting flat rather than them being the exact same length. It's up to you. So if this is how much I needed it, or if I'm going to do 1 inch, you want to measure that amount. So right now this is actually 1.5 inches. So I'll just do 1.5 inches to make it simple. So that's the amount you need to make it shorter. So now I'm ready to unpin this because we have to do something different. So 1.5 inches is what I need it shorter. So we have the front and the back layer of this. So you have to take that number that I just said and divide it by 2, which is 3/4 of an inch. And so from the fold to where right next to the hem here, that has to be 3/4 of an inch. So I need to move it a little bit. So that right there is 3/4 of an inch from the edge to right there. Also 6/8 if you're not sure. Okay, so 6/8. So I'm going to put a pin in here. When I put the pin in, I'm going to put it in the lighter part. Don't put it in the hem because that's not where you're actually sewing. You're going to be sewing right along here. So what I usually do is match up the side seams because that's what's important as well, because people are going to see that. So the technique I use is I make it the measurement I need first. Okay, so that's 3/4. Then I pinch it with my thumb and my finger and I pull it down. And then I see, are those matched up with each other or are they not? So mine are off a tiny bit, so I'm just going to move it so it looks like one continuous line. And then I'm going to put a pin in there. If you don't do that, what can end up happening is they can shift as you're sewing, and then you end up with the side seams not matching, which is going to be very obvious. So again, once I put the pin in there, I'll just double check it one more time that it didn't move when I pinned it. Okay, and that's matched up. I'm going to repin it. Okay, and then I'm going to go and do the same thing on that other side seam. This one isn't as big of a deal because there's no top stitching here, so you don't see any stitching. Okay, so I'm at 3/4, but again, I want to check and make sure my seam is matched up, which it is. So then I'll put a pin in it. Now, unless you have super wide leg jeans, you should be okay with probably about 2 or 3 pins in between the side seams. So I'm going to put 3 in because I already have that one in the middle. Put another one. Move over here between these 2 pins. Make sure it's correct, which it is. It's 3/4. Stick another pin in. And I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. So if you have jeans that are stretchy, you do want to make sure that you're stretching it a tiny bit when you sew, just not too much. These are definitely stretched denim. And you don't need a ton of pins, but you don't want it to be a larger amount in the middle compared to where the side seams are. Okay, so at this point, this pant leg is done. So you definitely want to do both pant legs. And again, if the amount is a little bit different because your one leg is longer than the other, no one's going to notice. So it's whatever makes it look best for you. A funny story. So I had a side business and I used to do a ton of sewing for people. And I really don't make too many mistakes. So the one time I'm doing my coworker's jeans, and I think she needed 7 inches or something off. They were super long. And so I'm back in my sewing room, back on Palmer Drive, and I was doing this, and I started to cut it, because the cutting is going to be at this one part. I started to cut, and then I think it was Kaylee, or yeah, it had to have been Kaylee, walked in and said, "Why are you cutting that?" And all of a sudden I realized I shouldn't have been cutting it. So she needed 7 inches off, so really this part should have been 3.5, but I did it 7, which would have made them 14 inches too short. So thankfully I had just made like a straight cut up them, and I tried to fix it as best I could, and I obviously didn't charge the person, but I felt super bad, and that was one of the only times I've really made a major mistake. So don't forget to half the amount that you're hemming them, because again, you have the front and back of this piece that you're going to be losing. Okay, so 3 pins on the one side. Then I'm going to do 3 more on this side. You could also mark it if you want, but since you're not putting that many pins in, I just measure and pin as I go, and that seems to be enough. So again, I started with the side seams first, made sure both of those were lined up, and then I'm going back and pinning in between those. Okay, now when you're trying to pick your thread color, you want to pick something that's going to blend in with the outside. Unfortunately, I don't have too many colors of blue. Let me see if black actually matches better. This one's a really dark blue. Let me see if this one matches, because you want one that's going to blend in. Okay, so this one's much better. So if you look at that, and then you look at this, you can see the thread difference in there, and then that would be more obvious. So you want to go darker. If you were doing a light wash jean, like if this was the outside, sometimes you can get away with a light blue or even a gray would work. So just lay your thread across it, and the thread that's in the needle is the only thread that really matters. Whatever's in the bobbin isn't going to be seen at all. So it doesn't matter that I have 2 different colors, because this one won't be seen. Okay, so before I go over to my machine, the other thing you want to make sure you have when you're doing this are jeans needles. So when you buy needles, they have a number on them. These are 100/16. That's pretty sharp. Lightweight fabrics are like chiffon and stuff would be a 70/10. A basic one's going to be an 80/12. Then you have a 90/14 and a 10/16. This is, although they look very similar when you look at them with the naked eye, if you look under it on a microscope, it's super sharp, so it'll go through the denim nicely. Thankfully, in the past couple of years, needle companies started doing something smart, because when you take them out of the package, you can't always see the number. So each needle, for Schmetz brand specifically, has different colors on them. So if I use this and then forgot what needle it was, I know that Jeans denim needles have 2 lines there, one blue, one purple. Knit ones are usually yellow. I forget what the other colors are, but that helps. And then the other thing is to make sure when you're putting in the machine, there's a flat side and a round side of the needle. Make sure the flat side is away from you. So I'm going to go over here and get set up on my machine. If you have an extension table, an extra thing on here, I would take it off, because we are going to be sewing a circle. So it'll be a little easier if you can take your pant leg and put it around this free arm, is what it's called. So I'm going to take my white thread out. Put my blue thread in. Joann Fabrics has some great deals on threads sometimes. So the I have 2 boxes of Gutermann up on my sewing machine, or sewing thread container over there. I think they were buy one get one free when I got it. So basically I got 2 of them for $30, and there's, I believe, I don't know how, 30 spools of thread or something. So if you take advantage of their sales, sometimes they even have buy one get 2 free. Okay, so I'm putting my bobbin in. And you're gonna pick a spot to start. I usually start in the middle, so I'm not starting right at one of the thicker parts with the seam. And so you just take your pant leg and you put over the free arm, and then I'm going to move my needle in the middle position so I can see it, use it more accurately. And I'm going to line it up so that my needle is going to go into the lighter fabric right next to the darker one. So I'm basically trying to sew there. A regular stitch is fine, 2.5 length, and you don't need to back stitch because we're going to overlap. Again, try not to sew over your pins. And then every once in a while you probably will need to adjust. Like I said, I used to work at Buckle, and so when I worked there, I think I forgot to change the needle. Whoops. When I worked there, I would have to do these all the time. So I would just pin a bunch and then sew a bunch and so on. Now when I'm at my seam, I am actually going to leave my pin in there. And the reason why is because I really don't want it to move at that particular spot. The rest of them it's okay, and I'm just going to guide that through there. But the rest of them I'm going to take the pins out before I get to them. And then I'm going to do a quick check before I go on to the next part, just to make sure that I am actually next to this dark piece. So again, I'm going to sew over this white pin because that's where my seam is. So you just got to be careful. Again, I just want to make sure that I don't move where I have things lined up. Okay, my beginnings here, so I'm going to go over top of my beginning stitches for about 1/2 inch. And I'm going to take it out. I'll trim my threads in a second. So if I pull down on the darker part, you can see my stitching. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm pretty much on right against that the whole way around, which I am. So I'm going to trim my threads. Okay, now jeans will definitely fray. So if you have a serger, you can go ahead and use a serger for this part. Since I know a lot of people don't have a serger, I'm just going to show it with the zigzag stitch, and you can do it with that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and zigzag over here on the lighter fabric. I don't want to go over here, or else that will zigzag will make it. I also want to use a wider zigzag. So I'm going to make mine as wide as it can go, and the regular length is fine. So I just want to make sure, again, I'm not going to go up onto this piece. We're just going to zigzag it. Again, no back stitching is needed because you're going to overlap at the beginning and end. And don't worry about if you go off to the side a little bit, because no one's going to see this. It's just going to prevent it from fraying. Okay, so you can see I did my zigzag next to my straight stitch. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut this excess off, because for some of you who need a couple inches off of your jeans, you don't want that flipping down when we're done. So you're going to take your shears, and I'm going to cut these off right next to my zigzag. Just be careful when you do this not to cut through your actual stitches. So it's okay to leave a teeny tiny bit right next to it. If you notice too, the way I'm holding it, I'm trying to make sure that nothing gets underneath there, because I don't want to snip anything incorrectly. Okay, so I'm going to cut that off, and then we're going to be at our last step. Okay, so it should be a little less than the amount that you needed. So we have our zigzag in there. Okay, so our last step then is going to be to flip the hem down so we can top stitch. So if you look, I don't know if you can see without looking super close, but you really can't see that I've hemmed it. So we want to keep it that way. So what I'm going to do is just do top stitching right next to my seam, and that's going to hold that seam allowance where the zigzag is. That's going to hold it down and prevent it from flipping up. So again, I'm going to put my needle in the middle position just so that it's easier for me to line up. And I'm going to try and put it right, pretty close to where the seam is. And I'm going to sew. I'm going to make this just a little bigger. I'm going to sew around. So again, I can see that my side seam is matched up. Guide it through where the side seam is. You could also press it before you do this if you want it to be good, but I found that if you just finger press it and push it down, it should be good. And then you come back to your beginning and overlap it just a little bit. And then you are done. So I'm just going to cut my threads real quick to make sure they're not hanging down. So if you look at it from far away, you shouldn't even be able to see that I stitched it. It still has its original hem on it. And the only reason why there's this little bit of distance there is because on the back side there was a little extra. So if you wanted to do it, you could kind of go down in there. And then this is what the inside looks like. So no one would see that in there. And it should wash fine and all of that. So the side seams are matched up. And this pant leg is done. So then I would just go and do the second pant leg the same exact way. And then when the jeans were done, they look great, like you didn't even do anything to them. So if you have any specific questions or want me to walk you through it again, I'd be more than happy to help you. And I hope this, number one, saves you some money, because it's much easier to do it yourself than pay someone to do it. And too. I hope you learned something new. So have a good night.